Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Are we all right? Thank you to these guys, the good people at the FCI here, for all their help in this. I'd like to thank JJ, one of my line cooks, for helping me today. And thank all of you folks for coming out. It's going to be, I think, a little bit of a departure from some of the more traditional demos and workshops. I think insofar as really what I'd like to do is sort of begin a dialogue, talk about sort of the creative process and how it works at WD50, using one dish, the Eggs Benedict dish, as an example of how we work through problems and sort of how we go about making a dish. But really I'd like to sort of open it up and start a dialogue about the creative process. I mean, this is like a lot of things at WD50. It's a work in progress, and it's not clearly defined. It's a very organic process that we're looking to refine and work on. And I feel like sort of this Socratic method is the best way that we have found to help us all sort of bring ideas and concepts down the road. And so that's why I would like to sort of open it up to everybody and have it really be a group discussion. We do have 5 stations here with all the mise en place to make the more technical aspects of the dish. But I don't know if this is the right forum for people to sort of roll their sleeves up and start making stuff. So I think probably what we'll do is make some of it up here, show a little bit on a video, and then serve you the dish, and again, have a dialogue about it, and hopefully that will be a better way that we can communicate, since in this case we don't really have the luxury of the big screen that we can sort of talk over. I don't feel like as more and more people sort of start to funnel in here and that we're limited to just an hour, that the best way to get a sense of the Eggs Benedict dish is to have you guys sort of break up into groups, because there are more and more of you coming. But anyway, I'm gonna talk about the dish a little bit first. It's Eggs Benedict. It's our version of Eggs Benedict. It's part of my obsessive egg nature that we always seem to have over the years, a dish on the menu that involves eggs in one form or another. And this dish, like many things at the restaurant, this dish, like a lot of things at the restaurant, has been in a constant sort of state of evolution. It's gone through many permutations. It started from several angles, but the initial, the way this dish got started was with a different dish. We had a dish on the menu for a long time. It was basically our version of a sandwich. My father had a couple of sandwich shops when I was a kid that actually closed before I even really grew up to be old enough to appreciate the fine art of sandwich making. But he is a lover of sandwiches, and so I wanted to make a sandwich that would sort of, as sort of an homage to my dad. And so we basically did we had a dish. It was more or less a play on sort of roast beef with lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, and onions. And what it was pickled beef tongue served with deep fried mayonnaise. We had a red onion streusel. We had a tomato molasses, and that was, and there was little tiny sort of micro brunoise of the hearts, the stems of romaine lettuce. So it was all the elements of a sandwich, and like a lot of things that we do at the restaurant, I felt like it very accurately would tap into a taste memory that anybody could have. I mean, your idea of a roast beef sandwich with mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato, and your idea are probably different, but the flavors, the tastes are probably fairly similar. And so we were having some fun with the idea, but ultimately sort of playing off a familiar understood, almost classic American flavor combination, which ultimately became the Eggs Benedict. But we wanted to deep fry mayonnaise, and we really had no idea how to do that. We weren't really sure where to start. I guess initially we thought, well, it should be simple, right? You simply need to get mayonnaise into a block form and bread it and fry it. It turns out that it's not that simple. There are a number of problems with trying to fry eggs, for instance. So the mayonnaise itself would curdle in the fryer or scramble. How do you actually portion it? How do you take mayonnaise, which is pretty much a fat system, a very high fat system? It's fluid, more or less. How do you set it, bread it, et cetera, et cetera? And I was fortunate enough, we've been fortunate enough over the years to develop a lot of relationships with various food manufacturers, food scientists, people in sort of more of a commercial field that have exposed us to some really interesting ingredients. And I had a friend of mine who's a food scientist, actually, we were having a discussion about how I could possibly deep fry mayonnaise, and he suggested that I try Gellan, which is a gum. I'm sure several of you in here are familiar with it. I know from the faces there are certainly large numbers of you that use it. It's a very interesting gum. It has a very high heat tolerance. Again, Heston talked about it yesterday about how it's very short and it breaks down. It's such a brittle gel that its flavor release is very efficient. But we didn't even really know how to use the gum. We got a hold of it, and for a long time, I believe the patent just ran out, but the patent was held by CP Kelco for many years. And so we started contacting people at CP Kelco to say, how can we make deep fried mayonnaise? And they didn't really, there was a hard thing for them to wrap their heads around as well. They started sending us formulations using their gums to make mayonnaise, which was interesting to see how mayonnaise is made commercially, but didn't really help us get any closer to figuring out how to put it in the fryer. But through a lot of trial and error, there was about 18 or 19 different attempts over about 4 or 5 months, we were able to figure out how to make a fried mayonnaise. But along the way we learned a lot of things. Like I said, that you can't put eggs in the fryer in an emulsion without it needing some help. And so we took the eggs out of the hollandaise. Of the mayonnaise, I'm sorry. That was our first step. Was we thought, well, okay, it's not going to work, so we're going to have to take the eggs out. We can't fry eggs because it keeps curdling, keeps scrambling. And the information we had on hand at the time, about 4 years ago, that was the decision we made, that we were going to have to take out the eggs. And so basically we used milk because we wanted some of the richness. So we used dairy to help sort of bring back and reintroduce some of that richness. We basically made a milk-based mayonnaise, but we needed an emulsifier. The egg yolks are functioning as an emulsifier, so we put some gelatin in there. Actually, we put a lot of gelatin in there. And it worked in two ways. The gelatin helped to act as an emulsifier, and it also helped us in the portioning process. We basically blended the Gellan gum with the milk cold, brought it up, added our bloom gelatin, and basically mounted our oil into it, finished it with some mustard, some lemon juice, and lastly a little bit of salt. The order in which you add things is important when working with Gellan gum, because Gellan gum is highly reactive to different ions. It likes calcium, sodium, potassium, and magnesium, but it likes it in a certain order in order to get the desired results. And so obviously salt is sodium, so we had to add that at the end, and there wasn't a problem with the calcium, which is inherent in milk, because the proteins in the milk sort of had occupied all the free calcium at the moment. So we were able to mix the Gellan gum with the milk very easily, warm it up, mount the whole thing together with our oil, finish it, pour it out into a half sheet pan, and let it sit overnight, at which point the gelatin would set, and we were able to portion it and bread it. We simply breaded it in panko, and it was quite successful. The idea again was to try to recreate that Hellmann's out of the jar texture, but hot. I didn't want it to be loose, I didn't want it to run and still be emulsified. I wanted it to be spreadable, just like a classic mayonnaise should be. And we were very successful and very fortunate after a while to be able to get it to work. And it was a dish that was very good to us. We got a lot of miles out of it, and got some recognition for it, which was helpful in bringing people into the restaurant. And we put it to bed for a while because we thought, we'd played that song long enough and it was time to move on. And later on, we were asked to be a part of the egg dish. Mr. Mikanowski, again, is probably an author, a cookbook author that some of you are familiar with. He put together several books on single subjects, and most recently a book on eggs, and asked us if we would like to do it. And of course we wanted to do it, but we had no idea what we were going to do. And we had a deadline pending, and we had been playing around with putting eggs, with cooking eggs at different temperatures. Again, something you see a lot of chefs doing right now is what's sort of what are the stages that an egg goes through as it's cooked. And we were experimenting with that, both the white and the yolk separately, and doing a lot of interesting things. And we had come across. We had been putting egg yolks in sleeves and discovered a texture that we really liked. And ultimately, we built a dish around the slow poached egg yolk. We're fortunate enough to make it in the book, and sigh of relief, we put this texture, this idea on the shelf, and didn't really do much with it until we thought about the eggs Benedict, which was something we've been working on for a little under a year now, I'd say. We've been working on the Benedict, and again, we wanted to build a dish that was true to the memory of eggs Benedict. It tapped into all the nostalgia and the best parts of eggs Benedict. I mean, it might be Sunday brunch for me, or it might be a late night snack for you. It means different things to different people, but again, in America at least, it has a fairly common flavor profile, taste profile. But we just wanted to have a little bit of fun with some of the textures and the ways that people explore or interact, I should say, with the eggs Benedict and eat it and enjoy it. And so we set about. We knew that we were going to start with this. This was going to be our egg part, and then we needed to think of an interesting way to deliver the hollandaise. And we simply looked backwards in order to look ahead, as is quite common. And we thought, well, let's just make we figured out how to fry mayonnaise. It's got to just be a simple step to fry hollandaise from mayonnaise. And in fact, it really wasn't. It was sort of complicated and took us through a lot of different experimentation, a lot of research, because we were determined to get the eggs back in. And we had a couple more years of experience under our belt, and thought that there would probably be a way we could get the eggs back in. And we were doing some work with Unilever, the good people that make Skippy, among 1,000 other things. And they introduced us to enzyme-modified egg yolks, which are egg yolks that have been treated with an enzyme, modified, that have, but the way they break it down, the various molecules, it gives the egg a much higher heat stability and tolerance, so that now suddenly sauces can be made, egg-based sauces can be heated at a much higher level. And at the same time we were introduced to that ingredient, we're doing a lot of research on the internet, and one of the resources for us in the creative process at the restaurant are patents, our existing patents. We're constantly scouring patents under various subject matters to see what sort of patents are good sources of information. For whatever reason, they happen to be written in a language that's fairly simple for the layperson such as myself, which is nice. And they're very exhaustive in the information they provide in terms of formulations, recipes, explanations of why and what happened. And virtually every patent cites several previous patents. So there becomes this sort of family tree of research right in front of you on how to look up a lot of things, and that's something that I really recommend for people to, websites like Free Patents Online and things like that are great. They have tremendous search engines within the site to look stuff up under any number of subject matter, and it's been very useful for us to find out stuff using patents. And so we started coming across a bunch of patents that were referencing this enzyme-modified egg yolk. And so we became intrigued by it, and we were able to get a 5-gallon bucket from somebody at Unilever, and we began experimenting with the hollandaise, and it was exciting because we could reintroduce the eggs back into it, because I think a mayonnaise and a mayonnaise and a hollandaise, yes, they're very similar on a certain level, but I think a real proper true hollandaise has a much eggier taste than a mayonnaise. I think a mayonnaise is a lot milder. There's a lot less egg typically in a mayonnaise versus a hollandaise, at least in my mind. Again, that's sort of the thing that's up to the individual and how you like to have your mayonnaise. But a hollandaise for me is very, very eggy and rich and sort of decadent. It's sort of all that's right with an egg, and we were happy that we could introduce the egg back into the process, and so we brought the gellan back, and the gellan and the egg, the enzyme-modified egg, and the gelatin again helping to portion it, poured the whole thing out. We cut it up, we breaded it, and this time, rather than breading it with breadcrumbs, we decided to bread it with English muffins, because again, an Eggs Benedict for me has got English muffins. And so we go through about, at this point, probably a case and a half a week of Thomas's English muffins, because again, we tried baking our own and it just wasn't the same. I mean, again, I think it's, there's people that have been talking about it, Heston again, I know Grant talks about it, how memories are just so linked and you can't shake it, and that's what the English muffin was for me, the Thomas's. So we went back to that, and we simply just take English muffins by the case, dry them in the oven at low temperature, grind them up, and bread them in the classic, flour, egg yolk, breadcrumb. But we use English muffins, and we use a slightly modified starch instead of straight AP flour called batter bind, and it just helps. It helps with the cling of the breading and the egg wash. So the whole thing is just a slightly more efficient process. And at that point, everything was going great. We were frying them, we were serving them, all was well with the world, until I started to run out of enzyme-modified egg yolk, and I kept calling the manufacturer and calling the manufacturer and calling the manufacturer, and I couldn't get anybody to take my calls. I couldn't get anybody to answer. Finally someone called me back. So how many pallets do you want? How many thousands of gallons of enzyme-modified egg yolk do you want? And the answer was, I want 5 pounds every 6 months. And sorry, it's just not going to happen. And so that we, as we all know, the JJ here was responsible for making it. We kept running lower and lower and lower with the egg yolk, and he kept getting more and more nervous that what was going to happen when we ran out. And we thought, well, what's going to happen if we don't have it? We don't have it, so let's go back to regular egg yolks. And again, we upped the amount of egg yolks slightly to give us a little bit of an edge, and we looked backwards again, and we started thinking about what's in a pastry cream. How do you make pastry cream? Pastry cream is very similar. It's an egg yolk starch thickened sauce with butter mounted into it. And wait a minute, starch, there's starch in it. What is the starch doing? Well, it's thickening the whole mass, but it's also buffering the egg yolks. It's insulating the egg yolks and helping them withstand the high heat that's necessary to cook a pastry cream. So again, we thought, aha, okay. We talked to some people at some starch manufacturers who confirmed that's what one of the roles cornstarch serves in a traditional pastry cream, is it acts as an insulator. So we worked backwards, and we found a modified starch, a starch that had already been pre-gelatinized or pre-cooked, so that it could be stirred right into the mixture simply. We didn't have to. It wasn't a cook-up starch like a standard flour or cornstarch. It's like Ovaltine or Tang. It's been treated in such a way so you can just whisk it in and it dissolves or it hydrates right away, which is very useful. And there's a whole line of these starches actually that can be whisked rather than sheared, and it's really interesting what you can do with those. And again, which is sort of what I want to talk about here, is how all of this research kept opening up new aspects and new areas and exposing us to new products that were really interesting. So in the process of succeeding and failing and succeeding again, we were introduced to a lot of new ingredients, a lot of new products, and we made some interesting relationships and discoveries, and I think that's what I really would like to talk about, sort of this process and how the whole thing comes together in an interesting way. So we got this is batter bind, I'm sorry. We got a hold of a waxy maize starch. It's a type of cornstarch that had been instantized or pre-gelatinized. We mixed that with a little bit of water and introduced that into our hollandaise. And at that point, we weren't sure if it was going to work because we didn't have our enzyme-modified egg yolks, and the whole thing actually was a huge success. The eggs didn't curdle, it didn't separate. The whole thing was great, and knock on wood, that's where we are today. So again, I have a video here that I would like to show you guys. Again, I'm not sure the practicality of that. Because there's so many people in the room, we can happily show you how to make the hollandaise, but it's not a terribly complicated process. The hard part was all the work and research that went behind it. I'm sure there are several people out there that are familiar with a fluid gel. It was something that Heston talked about and touched on yesterday, but I got some feedback from the StarChefs people, and they said that there were some folks out there that were not as comfortable with some of these products, and so using them, getting them into the system is very important. And gel-in, you can get a sense of how brittle it is, how short it is. On every table is a little tiny cube of it that again, there's a lot of folks in here. I don't know how it works to just sort of pass it around, or forget that gets kind of creepy after a while, everybody touching these tiny little cubes. But for those of you that are curious to know what a properly hydrated and gel-in gel at a very high concentration feels like, it's about 2.5%. It's kind of neat and it's kind of cool. It's very brittle, very short, and this is just made with water because that's the easiest way we could introduce it. We basically, again, there are recipes out there for some of you, and I was really hoping to show the video. I don't know if you guys think it makes sense for everybody to turn right there. I mean, the TV is there. At its inception, there were only 25 of you, so I thought it might actually make sense to show you the process. We can produce one right here if you guys like. But again, what I think is more interesting is that we have a dialogue, we have a conversation about the process, and maybe we can go from there, and hopefully we can serve some and you guys can taste it. But so we've got the hollandaise down. I would like to talk briefly on how the yolks are made. The yolks are simply we make our own sleeves from vacuum packaging bags, but my friend Evan here just pointed out to me that companies like Uline make rolls of these in a myriad of widths already sealed on both sides, and you can simply heat seal them to the desired length. And we simply take egg yolks seasoned with salt and cayenne and put them, just the yolks, fill them into here, and then tie them off. We simply tie them off. We let them sit overnight upright so that any air that's left can come out. I don't know, those of you that might have seen David Nils' demo yesterday, they showed how you can pull air out in the cryovac machine. You can do that too. Sometimes we have one machine and we use it a lot. It's not always an option. So we've just settled on this method right now where we simply make these the day before. They sit upright in the walk-in, all the air rises to the top. Because if they sit on their side, you get air bubbles and that can affect the texture a little bit. Sit them upright, and then we cook them upright at, hopefully this says 70 degrees. It's at 73 because we cook a whole bunch at once. We put them in here to account for the drop in temperature and then the recovery time. But we cook them at 70 for about 18 minutes, and then we ice them down, and then we cut the sleeves open, and we've got a texture here that is somewhere between, I'd say, a semi-soft cheese and fudge. Is sort of the best way to describe it, and it's a really interesting texture that we really like a lot. And you know, you can go a number of directions with this product. You can try it at a lower temperature, higher temperature, more time, less time. There's egg cookery is fascinating, but again, you guys all know that. I don't need to point that out. And there's a lot of fun things that can happen. How's it holding up all right? A lot of fun things that can go on in that way. So then all we do is we cut, when they're done, we take them out of the bag, and we portion them just into little plugs here. They're little, like almost like half the size of a cork or 3/4 length of a cork. And then we just warm them up. We have a CVAP at the restaurant, controlled vapor oven. You can see the booth here. The good folks at Winston Industries make it. It's a really neat piece of equipment that has a lot of options. I wouldn't say it's a replacement for the combi oven, but it's a nice alternative in terms of what it can do. And so these just go in the oven to get warmed. Actually, maybe we should do that. We should put them in. Should we start frying some hollandaise? Maybe we're pretty close, I think. So, and then there's sort of only 1 or 2 elements left to an Eggs Benedict. Of course, you need the Canadian bacon, and we were trying to figure out the best, or not the best, a way to deliver the Canadian bacon, and the dish didn't have a lot of texture, didn't have a lot of good, like, glassy crunch to it, which is something that we're always aware of when making dishes at the restaurant. Because it's an element of eating that eating food that I find very pleasurable, and I guess it was again confirmed, you know, with some sort of hard data by Heston yesterday, talking about you know, what a large percentage of people actually like the crunch in food. So that was very interesting to sort of have some validity to our idea. But we simply take Canadian bacon and we freeze it, and then we slice it, and every day right before service, right at 5:30, we fry off lots and lots of it, because we do go through quite a bit of this. It's on our tasting menu. And we just little chips, little sort of wafers of fried Canadian bacon. And we hold them in a low oven during the service and serve them. And then this is on our tasting menu, we get a lot of people that are vegetarians, and so for the vegetarians we've made spinach crisps, so we can serve eggs Florentine to the non-pork eaters of the world. And this is simply a little bit of spinach. It's been pureed. It's been blended with some sort of substrate. In this case, we use a little bit of methyl cellulose. It's a good film former. Spread it out, and we dry these in the dehydrator, and we make these again every day. It's a nice alternative. I didn't bring enough of these for you guys to try. I just thought, sort of in covering our bases and thinking about the creative process, we're always keenly aware of dietary restrictions and how that factors in, and how we can still offer people a really interesting dish without, you know, just simply taking the bacon off and presenting it to them, but give them something that will work for them. And then the last part of the dish, for me, again, is my memory, is the whole thing sort of covered in chopped chives. And in this case, we're going to put some chive points on the plate for you to get a sense of it. And that's ostensibly the dish. It's you know, a poached egg, English muffins, Canadian bacon, and chives. And what I hope is a very sort of clever way of delivering Eggs Benedict, but in no way, shape, or form deviating from whatever Eggs Benedict means to all of us, because I think it means something wonderful to me, and I have a feeling to those of you that took the time to come here that it resonates in some way with you. I would, you know, I feel bad that I can't show you the video, because I think that it would be helpful. But I would like to serve the dish. Is that can we fry the dish up, and then I would like to just sort of, I would like to talk to the audience to sort of engage people and sort of begin a dialogue, a discussion about the creative process, because this is an example, I think, of almost 5 years of ongoing research in various ways at the restaurant. We've been fortunate enough to have, at one point we had one gentleman, then we had two gentlemen who were exclusively just doing sort of research and development in the restaurant, just working on ideas, just working on various projects, troubleshooting, trying to figure out how to deep fry hollandaise, trying to do a myriad of sort of tasks that are not related to getting your station set up every day, which is obviously critical to the operating of the restaurant. But for us, it became more and more apparent that we needed to have people who could dedicate their time exclusively to the research and development of dishes and work on the troubleshooting. I mean, what's really nice about the restaurant is that it is very much a group effort. You know, there's a lot of people that come together and contribute ideas and contribute combinations and techniques to the restaurant. And I think that's important. Again, I think this sort of open source sharing of ideas, again, Heston talked about it yesterday, and it was something that I was hoping to talk about. I think that it's important that these ideas be out there, that we talk about them, that we get inspiration and that we share ideas and that we talk to each other. I mean, this dish started as an idea to make a sandwich, and it went through a number of different iterations on that field, and then it was just for a book opportunity that came our way, and then it went on the shelf, and then it was back to being a menu item, and it's gone through so many changes, and we've learned so many things as part of the process. You know, as we continue to fail and fail and fail, we learn a bunch of new things, and plenty of ideas grow out of it, and that was really what Will had told me people wanted to get a sense of, was the creative process. What do we go through at WD50 to get from sort of point A to point B, and in doing so demonstrate a dish that was a dish that a lot of people were asking about. And we really sort of go from point A to point Z. There's no B because there's no end to it. It sort of is open-ended on one side. From the inception of an idea to it doesn't really end, because when in the process of figuring out how to do deep fried hollandaise, any number of other ideas sort of dealt it out of that and have not yet been finished or found their way to the menu. So again, it's an ongoing process. So with that in mind, I think, you know, I'm sorry I can't show the video. I would really like to. I'm happy to stick around. The reason I thought it was interesting, because that video actually has the enzyme-modified egg yolk and some methyl cellulose in the hollandaise, which we have since taken out. What we thought was critical, it turns out it was not, and it was interesting how we troubleshot that whole process. And I think that is part of what's interesting about cooking and about how we work, and I'm sure how many of you work out here. So shortly we'll be, you know, putting out some plates for everybody to try. But if there are some questions that people have, I'd love to sort of open it up and talk a little bit about whether it be this dish or the creative process in general. You know, I think that there's a lot of people showing a lot of interesting techniques, and we wanted to get a little bit less specific today and talk a little bit more conceptually and hopefully open it up in a way. So if anybody has a question, Evan?
I think it would be helpful. Could you talk a little bit about how you develop relationships with food scientists? Do you just cold call the starch company and run through what you want to do with it? I mean, how have you been successful at developing those relationships within those companies? To be able to call people up and say, this is what we're trying to do.
The question was basically how we, over the years, developed these relationships with the various manufacturers and food scientists to have the opportunities that we have to say, hey, I'm trying to make deep fried hollandaise, can you help? And the answer is yes. It involved initially a lot of cold calling, a lot of just looking up, you know, who's a big starch manufacturer and starting to call them. Initially, it was just about calling, and for a long time, probably, I mean, as you know, because you were with us for the first year the restaurant was open, there was a lot of people that just simply didn't call back, because we collectively are never going to represent a large enough buying power unless we all opened up a cooperative together and bought it once and stored it somewhere and then figured out how to box it and ship it to you and you and you and you. But the problem is that they want volume. They want high volume. And for us, it was just a matter of calling and calling and calling and calling, and then going to trade shows, going to the becoming an RCA member, the Restaurant Chefs America member, going to IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists, going to those things and saying, I know this is crazy, but can you tell me where I can get a hold of 5 pounds of low acid gellan? And just the fact that you could use their language began to open up doors, because they're used to people that aren't even really familiar with the product that they're selling to. So developing a language and cold calling and cold calling and cold calling. In terms of the scientists, I mean, that's good luck on my part that I was able to meet some people. I mean, Harold McGee is a very accessible man, and I'm sure many of you here have his email and have probably written him, and he's very giving with the information that he has. I was lucky enough to make some connections years ago with some people at the Fat Duck that have moved on to other projects, but that were actually in the food science industry. And it's not easy. It's not an easy connection to make, but it's been very useful to us and very helpful. And I mean, the internet is the place to start to look up these companies and just keep knocking. I mean, the more people that knock on the door, the better it is for all of us. So again, it's good for me if you guys call. Because the more people that are looking for it, the more they will realize that we represent a share of the market. We don't represent a large share, but we're out there and we do count. And what ultimately helps is that we're doing the most interesting stuff with their products. Sure, CP Kelco sells Smucker's billions of pounds of pectin every year, but they make jam out of it. And we all love jam, and it's one of their biggest accounts. But what can be done with pectin can be infinitely. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with jam. I'm not trying to denigrate jam. I love jam. But there's so many more interesting applications, and that has been useful to us. The fact that they're able to see that we can think a little bit outside of their corporate box has helped them want to reach out to us. So, yes?
How do you get to the first question? In the sense that to think about taking something you're saying was wanting to make fried pancakes. You see jam everywhere on the shelf. How do you think that, well, I can do something different with that? And that first project, I think something, what sparks it?
The question is, what sort of sparks the initial idea? What makes you want to make a sandwich with a twist on a sandwich, or a twist on Eggs Benedict? I don't really have the answer for that. I don't know why we think about food necessarily the way we do. I can't explain that. I mean, creativity is not that linear. I can't say to my guys, okay, today we have to make a dish. Today let's come up with a dish. Or let's begin to come up with a dish. It doesn't work that way. I mean, I guess some of it comes out of a curiosity. Some of it hopefully comes out of a sense of humor. It's important, I think, that food that there be some humor in your food. I mean, we're not doing something so serious that we can't bring some levity to it. I mean, we're not curing cancer. We're not helping feed the poor. We're not doing something. I mean, we're feeding people, we're nourishing people, but it's important to have a little fun. It's important to be playful, and I think that sort of keeping your mind open to how and when an idea can come to you is important. That's something I try to tell the guys. It's sort of leave your mind open to how and when an idea may come to you, because you don't really know when it's going to come or how it's going to come, but just be ready for it when it does come. Maybe that means writing it down, and also part of that is developing a relationship with your team where they feel comfortable putting their ideas on the table. That's something that's been a hard thing for us at the restaurant, is getting people that feel comfortable to say, hey, chef, I have an idea, can we try this? That's a very simple idea that is very hard to get a lot of cooks to wrap their head around. And that's been a fun project, to get people to say, hey, can we make a sandwich, or can we make a bagel with all its garnish? And we're on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Everybody eats bagels down here, and it's a bagel with cream cheese and lox and scallions, and I've been eating it since I was a kid. Can we put that on the menu? Sure, but it's taken me a long time to get people to the point where they're comfortable to say, hey, can we do this? But that's been a really fun project, part of WD-50. At this point now, whenever we hire a cook, before they get hired, that's part of the process. It's part of telling them, look, you are going to be required not only to have your station set up for service, but you are going to be required to contribute some ideas to this place. And that's very wide open. It's not specific. You're not going to have to do X, Y, or Z, but I am going to ask you at some point to give me some ideas. And some of them are like, won't shut up and talk and all day long about ideas, and other ones I have to poke and prod and kick and scream to get them. And sometimes those are the best ideas, the ones that they've been holding on to for God knows how long, but they just didn't feel comfortable letting it out. And that's been a really exciting part of the process is, if a cook does say, hey, eggs Benedict are pretty cool, what can we do? And then we bounce that idea around the room. There's 10 or 12 of us in there at any given time, and some people are newer and don't know the techniques that we have under our belt, and some people are older and can say, hey, yeah, remember we used to whip that or do this, and it's a really nice coming together. To answer your question, it's not quite so black and white as to how you have the idea. I don't really have an answer to that. Yes.
When I think about hollandaise generally, I think about an aeration within it. Did that at all influence your creative process with your hollandaise?
You're asking
whipping of the egg?
When we made a hollandaise, I thought about the aeration of a hollandaise.
Right, with the fried hollandaise as well.
Well, I hope that when you have this hollandaise, if you do, because I don't know if there's enough for everybody, but if we put one on each plate, I think we can stretch it a little bit. But it, again, much the same way I wanted the mayonnaise to be like sort of the Hellmann's, which I think is the paradigm, at least east of the Mississippi, of mayonnaise. Texturally, I wanted this to be like the hollandaise that I was taught to make, and I learned to make hollandaise from Jean-Georges, and the recipe 9 yolks and a pound of butter is burned into my psyche, and I can't forget it. And that texture is what I base it on, and it's meant to be it's not. Again, I think hollandaise and mayonnaise, you and I share the same flavor, sense of how it should taste, but texturally you might like it looser, you might like it stiffer. This one is a fairly thick, fairly properly aerated hollandaise. It is made in the blender, and the blender does pump a lot of air into it. So I wouldn't say that it mimics the action of whiskey, but it does sort of roll some air into it very, very successfully, which again, I hate to keep harping on it, would be very clear in that TV screen right there, and so I do apologize.
Another question kind of related to that, like, not that I've used this ever, but like the processed hollandaise sauce, were any of like your ingredients that you use in your hollandaise sauce connected at all to like a processed hollandaise?
The question is, are sort of store-bought Knorr type instant hollandaise or processed hollandaise, were there some of the ingredients that could be found in there, or some of the inspiration for our dish? And certainly, that's what we began to look into. There's all sorts of packaged hollandaise that's gone through, retort. It's been heat pasteurized, which is very high temperature. And why does it hold up to that? And that was information that we were looking into. What's in their sauces, besides maybe powdered egg yolks or artificial egg flavor or tarragon essence or whatever. What's in there that is actually usable, viable for us? And we came across some interesting store-bought hollandaises that were actually pretty good, but we came across a patent for something called universal sauce, and it was basically a sauce base that was based on the enzyme-modified egg yolk that could then be used in Alfredo sauce, hollandaise, and it was basically a base, and it was really interesting, and it was bulletproof. We made it, we microwaved it, we froze it, we defrosted it, it never separated. It was really interesting. It was bulletproof. Unilever has a patent on it, and they're selling stuff in the market in the frozen food section right now that are made with those sauces. It's interesting. I think that the technology that's involved on the commercial side of food manufacturing is in many ways far more educated than the average chef. The science and work that's behind all that food has a lot more knowledge behind it than what the average cook has, and so that's an important part of what we do at the restaurant. Using existing data and information to help us understand what's happening to all these things while they cook is making us all better cooks because it's making us more knowledgeable about the process. You know, we now know what's happening to all of us in the room because this is an exciting time right now where science and technology, I mean, the culinary side and the science side are coming together, as they always have for a long time, but right now it's resulting in a lot more information being fed to the private freestanding chef restaurant, which is resulting in a lot more information that we have to absorb, which is teaching us more about what's happening to an egg as it poaches, or a chicken as it steams, or a vegetable as it blanches, which is giving us more knowledge and more information and more options about how to cook food. So at the end of the day, the takeaway is we know more about cooking than we knew when we first started. So sort of to answer your question in a very long-winded way, as I'm prone to, yes. So, yeah. How did I know that this sort of, I hate to use the word molecular gastronomy for any number of reasons, but how did I know that it would be sustainable? Well, it hasn't proven to be sustainable yet because it's in its infancy, but basically it's about learning. To me, my understanding is it's about learning. It's about taking information that a lot of people have, some of it is brand new and some of it is very old. What Clarence Birdseye knew in 1920 about freezing vegetables, you and I don't know yet. So getting that information and chewing it up and using it in the restaurant is, to me, ultimately about learning. And to say that learning is going to be a fad is crazy. I don't think at any point learning is, people are going to be like, oh, those guys are learning down there. They're so dorky. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah, are we going to be serving food like this forever? Maybe not. Is the delivery of the food going to be this way? I mean, that's the plating. That's something that Jordy talked about earlier. That will come and go, but the knowledge behind it is not going to go anywhere because we're learning. Do we educate the diners? We try not to put this in people's faces. You know, the knowledge or the information that we have, we try not to put in people's face. We have, the wait staff is trained so that they can answer questions. If a diner is curious to know the technology or the technique or the process behind a given dish, we make sure that the wait staff has that information, but we certainly are not shoving it in people's faces saying, hey, this is liquid nitrogen frozen foie gras, or this is an enzyme-modified egg yolk. Though that doesn't sound delicious anyway, you know. We have the information for the people that want to have it, but we try not to be showy and try not to shove it in their faces. They're not cold though.
They're not cold. They're not
okay. All right, so we're passing around some Eggs Benedict. Again, it's always a little tough doing an away game versus doing a home game. I think everybody knows that. So bear with us. Hopefully the eggs are warm, the hollandaise is hot, and you get a sense of it. But again, it's not going to be quite the same as were you to come in the restaurant. So I apologize for that. But anyway, yes? I'm sorry, the thought process behind flavor pairings. Yes, the thought process we have behind our flavor pairings starts with the idea of balance, I guess. How can we balance the different flavors? How can we balance salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami on a plate in conjunction almost always with texture? That's something that we're keenly aware of, balancing the flavors or using texture as a way to bring a flavor to the plate, but we are often looking for the plate to be balanced. Of course, there's a catch there, and that is personal preference is always going to weigh in when there is no universal. You know, most people like sweet things. I happen to like bitterness. I like bitter things. Oftentimes there's an element of bitter to my food that I find quite pleasant, and some people don't. I also like acid. I like acidity a lot. That comes from early exposure, I think, to acidity. I don't know where my predilection for bitterness comes from. I hope I'm not a bitter person, but I don't know why I seem to gravitate towards things bitter. But for us, it's about how does a dish taste? And it's always important when we make a dish not to just taste it, but to eat the whole thing. To eat the whole thing, and I often eat the whole thing in an absurdly fast manner, so that I can see, because I don't know how you're going to eat it, and I'm not in the business necessarily of saying, you know, eat that, then that, then that, then that, because that gets back to what this gentleman was talking about being too much in someone's face. And we try to temper what we do with how we serve it, and the rules, the how many regulations there are in eating something, because I don't want to. New Yorkers are tough too to begin with. They don't like to be told what to do. But we balance things: the salty, the sweet, the bitter, the umami, the sour, with texture. We try to move them together, to integrate them together. Sometimes a dish is lacking both crunch and acidity, and so we might try to make the acidity crunchy. Or it might be lacking some sweetness. Is almost always crispy. Not always, but it's a common sugar. It's crispy. That's a no-brainer. I'm sorry? Aroma compounds. Do we work with aroma compounds or flavors, essences, things like that? You know, we work a little bit with them. We certainly do. There are certain ingredients that I'm still on the fence about, that I'm unresolved, and adding flavor. Adding, you know, there are houses that make also, I mean, again, Heston showed aromas and how aroma can play in externally, but he didn't talk at all about adding flavor to a dish, you know, taking a little bit of wintergreen and throwing that in your mint ice cream and really, whoa, this is the best ice cream I've ever had. I'm unresolved